But even more so than that, we are capable of holiness, and we have a responsibility on a daily basis to be pursuing holiness. And so I want us to, usually I like to bring lots of rabbinic commentaries and midrashim and passages from the Talmud. This week, I really just wanted to stick to the text itself, just so that we'll see how far we get with it. But again, as I said, I think this is more important to learn the rules and regulations that are laid out in this Torah portion than spending as much time as we do potentially on the Ten Commandments. Because at the end of the day, this is where the real work is done. And so some even believe that there is a specific author. Some believe that there are different authors for different parts of the Torah, and believe that this author specifically was trying to figure out, how do you create a new set of 10 commandments? And there are more than 10 in this Torah portion, but what is the updated, more realistic, and more specific set of rules that can guide us, that still hit on many of the categories that we find in the 10 Commandments about our relationship with God and our relationship with one another. But how can we be a little bit more specific on how we actually can do that in our daily lives? So that's what this really attempts to do. And it actually is almost literally in the middle of a Torah. If you were to unroll a Torah, we're almost really at the center of a Torah. So not only do I believe it's a central piece of our text, but it almost literally is in the center of the Torah itself. Okay, so we will just start going through it and break it down. And of course, I would love to hear I'm not going to use that version. I'd love to hear your thoughts as we go through it together. Okay, so we begin with, Adonai spoke to Moses, as God does many times, saying, "Speak to the whole Israelite community and say to them, you shall be holy, for I, Adonai, your God, am holy." Okay, so really important right off the bat, this is not just about obedience to God. God is not laying out a set of laws to say, I want you to follow these laws because they're my laws and therefore you should follow them. No, this is not just about obedience. This is also about shared ownership. And this is why it's slightly even different from the 10 Commandments themselves. Here is saying, okay, I am holy, but more importantly than that, you shall be holy. You have co-ownership in this endeavor, which is how to build a better world. And if we believe that God's purpose, and one of God's purpose, is to build a better world and to help create a world of harmony and peace, then we have a responsibility not just to be obedient doers, but really to have co-ownership and to strive, right? Already built in the very beginning of this is we are not perfect, and yet every single day, we have the opportunity to elevate ourselves and to bring a little bit more holiness into how we act in the world. Okay, not just our thoughts, but how we act. Okay, so that's where we're kicking off, saying, what is the most important thing that we should try to do is to try and be holy in our lives. And so the next question is, well, what does it mean to be holy? And that's why then this whole list are the ways in which we express holiness, that if we can do these, we are bringing more holiness into the world, and we are elevating God's purpose and our own purpose. Okay, so with that, we start right away, and it kicks off really with references to the 10 Commandments. And so we can see already that the Kiddushim and the Holiness Code is in some ways mirroring and playing off of and riffing off of the 10 Commandments that we find in the book of Exodus and expanding beyond those, right? So you shall revere and honor your mother and father, which of course is one of the 10 Commandments, and keep my Sabbaths. I am Adonai your God. Okay, so right off the bat, referencing two of the most important commandments that we got from the 10 Commandments, but interestingly enough, not mirroring the 10 Commandments directly. You would assume that this would, if you're going to take a set of laws and you're going to expand upon them, that you may keep the same order. And you may actually, because if you think about the 10 Commandments themselves, they start with our relationship with God, and then they move in the latter half of the 10 Commandments into our relationship with one another. And the transition being the commandment to honor your mother and father. And in that case, actually, it's your father and mother. But here, the idea and the way into holiness begins with our relationship with one another, and specifically with our parents, And then it starts with that, and then it goes into Sabbaths. Okay, so a little interesting move there to reverse the order. Many different ways in which we can try and interpret that. But once we go from there, you do not turn to idols or make molten gods for yourselves. I am Adonai, your God. Again, one more reference to the Ten Commandments, and this time it's referencing the first and the second commandments more so, right? So again, the reverse order, and then there aren't any more clear-cut references to the Ten Commandments in the rest of the Kiddushim. There are some allusions to it, but are slightly different. Okay, but then we have this interesting shift. We go from these, which are pretty well known, to this next law, which doesn't seem to necessarily fit in as easily. And I've always, up until I actually studied it a little bit more this week in preparation for today, kind of never really understood why this was a part of it. It seemed to kind of be, misplaced. When you sacrifice an offering of well-being to Adonai, sacrifice it so that it may be accepted on your behalf. It shall be eaten on the day you sacrifice it or on the day following, but what is left by the third day must be consumed in fire. If it should be eaten on the third day, it is an offensive thing. It will not be acceptable. And one who eats of it shall bear the guilt of having profaned what is sacred to Adonai. That person shall be cut off from kin. Okay, so this is interesting. Why is it now talking about sacrifices, right? If we go back to the beginning of the book of Leviticus some weeks back, we spent a lot of time talking about the different types of sacrifices that were offered at the temple, most of which the priests and the Levites would help to do. And, people, Joe Schmo Israelite would bring a sacrifice to the temple. It would be sacrificed. That would be a good thing, and that would allow that person to be connected to God. And then the priest would take that food and they would eat it and split it up and have some of this. But the offering of well-being is the one type of sacred food that a lay person could eat. So I think this is why this is included here, right? So a lay person takes this food. Once this food has been sacrificed, assuming that it's a good chunk of meat that they now have, once they sacrifice it, they're going to take it back to their family, take it to their home, and eat it. And it says here that it shall be eaten on the day you sacrifice it or on the day after, but what is left by the third must be consumed in fire. And that if you eat it beyond that, it's not going to be acceptable to God. And why is that? Because you have profaned what is sacred to God, right? The idea was that what this person was doing is bringing something that had been declared sacred and holy, a food that had been kind of sacrificed and set up as a way of being special and holy in some way because of the ritual by which it was slaughtered. And now they're bringing it back into their home, and they can't just slowly eat it day after day, even though I'm sure they wouldn't necessarily be able to eat all of it. But that by bringing this sacred food back into their home, what this may be, according to some scholars, is the precedent for what later becomes the rabbinic idea that the home becomes the alternative to the temple. In other words, all the things that used to happen in the temple, we now bring and do in our home. For example, some of the rituals of Friday night at Shabbat, right? The challah. If you see some people who put salt on their challah, right? That's a reference to the sacrifices that were done. So there are these things that we do during Shabbat and other, of course, meals and other significant things that happen in the home that once there was no temple, it was almost as though we are supposed to see our Shabbat table on Friday night as a sacrificial altar. And that what we are doing on Friday night with Shabbat is not only separating the week from Shabbat itself, but we are creating a place where we are elevating our experience. And that as we enter into Shabbat, the table itself and everyone around it and the food that we are eating is transformational. And that it's not just in our minds, but that it's literally through the actions and the food that we are ingesting on a Friday night that we are making this transition into Shabbat. And so that the table itself is similar to the Holy of Holies or the sacrificial table at the temple, where you would elevate yourself and be connected to God. So here it's as if this is trying to say that even in the rituals that you are going to do, that you have to realize that those rituals have significance, and you don't just kind of do them when you want to, that there is a time and a place to do these rituals and to do them right. And when you do them right, that means they're not going to last forever. And so recognize that there are boundaries around the rituals we do and take full advantage. When you're doing Shabbat, be in it. Don't be distracted. When you're celebrating Passover, be in it. But when the time is up, don't just kind of draw it out, or don't not take it as seriously as you should. If you're going to do it right, and then be done with it and move on. Okay. So that seems to be what's going on with this law so far. Okay. Any questions up to this point? Okay. We'll keep going. Next one. Now, this one is also very important. When I think about this, I think about our Karsh Center, for example. Like tonight at our Shabbat services on this side of town at our Glazer campus, we are honoring the volunteers who have spent time over the last year working in our Karsh Social Service Center here on this campus. And I always think about, when I read this text, how it's very much linked to Jewish responsibility of what we're doing with that in that Karsh Center. Right down the hall for me. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap all the way to the edges of your field, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. You shall not pick your vineyard bare, or gather the fallen fruit of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger. I, Adonai, am your God. So here we're really learning that God has a responsibility to care for those who don't have what we have. Right, that one of God's biggest responsibilities is to care for the less fortunate. But what we also have here is that we ourselves have a responsibility to be caring for that. One of the most important things that we can do is to take care of those who don't have what we have, and to care for the poor and the indigent and those who don't have resources. That means, and it's interesting the way that this is set up. When you go out, and I, of course, this was in an agricultural setting, but how we interpret this and relate this to our own lives is, of course, really important, because we're not agriculturalists anymore. When you are successful, don't keep all of your success to yourself. You shall not reap all the way to the edges of your field, right? When you are gathering all the benefits of your success, whether that, in this case, let's say financial success, however you want to define that, don't keep it all for yourself, right? You don't just gather it and keep it for yourself, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Those are the things that would fall, right? In other words, as they were going and they would pick from the vineyards and things would fall on the ground, don't then also go back and pick those things up. In other words, don't be greedy. Don't make your success purely about yourself. You shall not pick your vineyard bare, or gather the fallen fruit of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger. I am Adonai, your God. Right. So how do we make sure that in our own success, and I think we actually can expand this beyond just financial success, when we think about what it means for us to be successful in the world, the things that we are lucky enough to have, the support systems, whatever it may be that allows us to feel a sense of gratitude for what we're able to accomplish, how can we make sure that we are sharing that or allowing others to also have similar benefits? Right? How can we do the work in the world to help other people have support systems just like we do? And we might be able to do that financially, but maybe it is just through our emotional support of other people that we can offer support. Okay. I feel like I heard something, but I don't know if that was someone trying to say something. Yeah, Ben.
Thank you. One other thing that I see here, and I besides what you're, of course, teaching, this line, you shall not pick your vineyard bare. And to me, I add in my mind, sort of how we treat things around us, or like a basic good project management. Let's not, use up the earth or drain all the water. I guess I'm saying climate change. And, leave something, some trees maybe, because you need, if you cut it bare, it's, even a field, if you keep going on the same field over the same crop, eventually you'll deplete the resources in that dirt. So farmers will often plow under their crops.
Right. So on a bigger global level, not just our own success, right? But how do we make sure, especially with global warming and climate change, how do we make sure that we are not being so selfish that we're taking up all the resources so that we screw the next generation, right? How do we make sure that we are not just stripping this world of everything and keeping it for ourselves for future generations? Thank you. That's such a good point, important one. Merle.
I was just going to say, every Friday morning I go to a nearby farm, local, and they've become, over the last 10 years, they've become very dear, very close friends. And a few years ago, I asked Ken, what do you do with the produce that you don't sell on Friday and Saturday? You're closed on Sunday and you don't open again until the next Friday. And I know they use a lot of that produce in the restaurant that they own, that's part of the farm. And he said, well, every Sunday, he said, everyone else is at church. We go and we distribute the leftover produce that isn't sellable or cookable to, they don't care what it looks like, to homes or to indigent people, even if they're standing on the street corner, because the farm is on the Indian reservation. He said, they need food as well. He says, and, and I asked him once, I said, he said, until August, when the crops are gone and they have to start over again until mid-September, he said, that's the only time we take the crops down to the bare earth. He said, otherwise, he said, we will take even seeds that have fallen and we'll give them to people on the reservation. They're not Indian. The reservation here gives them the land. He said, but even people who aren't farmers can take those seeds and plant them in their backyard, and we go teach them how to plant them so that their families will have something in 6 to 8 weeks. And I think, everybody says, why do you go there? And one, it's because I only want organic produce. But the other piece is because we as a family need to support these people who are supporting others.
Right. Yes, that's so important. Right. And just two things on that. One, of course, when we think about the land, and this also goes back to what Benjamin was saying, right? In an upcoming Torah portion, we have the idea of the sabbatical for our land, right? That every 7 years, we're supposed to let the land lay fallow so that it can redevelop itself. And then I would just say, a lot of what the Karsh Center does is deal with food insecurity, and Sunday mornings and Tuesday afternoons, and also with a mobile food pantry. There are people who come and line up. I mean, unfortunately, during this pandemic, the numbers have increased significantly. So it's at least about 500 people over the course of the week who come and rely on the food that we distribute, which is a combination of fresh fruits and vegetables and then some non-perishable goods. And they come and they rely on that. I mean, so how do we take, and much of that food is based on collaborators within the network for the Karsh Center, that like Food Forward, that takes produce that may not necessarily be acceptable in Gelson's and Whole Foods, but is still legitimately great food, and provides them to food pantries such as ours so that people can actually still have fresh produce. Right. So how do we make sure that we are caring for those communities? So anyone who, I just want to keep pushing the Karsh Center, since it's a part of our organization and also such a wonderful way to feel as though you are making a difference and to live out literally this portion and to help live that out. So I highly recommend karshcenter.org, and you can always reach out to me if you want to find out more information. Okay.
Rabbi,
Yes.
Rabbi, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. What I'd like to say is that number 9, I just lost it on my page here. I don't know why, but I lost it. Thank you. Number 9 is such a remarkable statement, and it is so fulfilled. It's not just what you're supposed to do, but we read the story of Ruth every Shavuot, and it's all about this, that a landowner cannot produce just for himself, but he's mandated. It's not up to his discretion, but he must leave food for the poor and for the gleaners. And that's how he ends up marrying Ruth. And he even tells his people who work for him not to embarrass them, not to make them feel bad when they're gleaning, because this is the food that they need. So the whole holiday of Shavuot, to me, even Purim, with its idea of giving mishloach manot le'evyonim, of giving gifts to the poor, no matter what the holiday, no matter what the Bible says, it emphasizes again and again to give to others. It is not sufficient to live your life for your family, for your loved ones. You must give to strangers and to the others. And this has always been a very strong part of my personal duty.
Thank you, Miriam. Yes, if you're not doing this work, you are not even get close to attaining any level of holiness. This is a significant responsibility for everyone. And that's why it's towards the top of the list, so to speak, here, right? And I love the connection to Shavuot, right? Because Shavuot is a recognition and a celebration of the receiving of Torah. And we usually, again, focus on the 10 Commandments. And we read the story of Ruth. And yet, maybe we read the story of Ruth now that I'm thinking about, maybe it's a subversive way of working this Torah portion and this set of rules into Shavuot, that it's not just the 10 Commandments, which say nothing about reaping harvests, which say nothing about agriculture, which actually say nothing about the poor and our responsibility to the poor at all. And here it's referring to the need to include that. And so maybe Shavuot, instead of just focusing on the 10 Commandments, we really should be focusing even more so on Leviticus 19 and Kedoshim, which gets to the heart of both the story of Ruth, which we read on Shavuot, and to the significant ingredient in trying to attain holiness in the world. Great. Thank you, Miriam, very much.
I have a question now. It's occurred to me, and it might be minor, but it comes right after the person eating a sacrifice and not doing it on the third day. So can there be some connection with that? I mean, thank you, Miriam, that I always know the Ruth story, but was there a connection, I mean, on a more subtle level?
Yeah, great. Here are a few that I found. One is that as you give God the suet of your well-being offering, you give God some of the part of the offering, you give to the needy, right? So that's one connection that's made between the two of them. You give to God, you give to the needy, you give something important and significant to both. Another interpretation is that in contrast to the well-being offering, which comes right before this, which is completely eliminated, right? Because it has to be ingested in fire, has to be destroyed after a couple of days. The field and the vineyard should not be stripped, but some produce should be left for the needy, right? So the contrast between what we do with the offering versus we cannot strip the entire world, we have to get to the needy. And the third one that I found, since the offerer of the sacrifice cannot possibly consume the entire animal in 2 days, but must invite others to his feast, so a portion of the field's produce should be left for the needy. Right. So those are some different interpretations that are brought as to the connection, thank you, Susan, between what came just before and this piece, right? And so that they are linked to one another. Great. Thank you very much. Yeah, Penina.
All right. I just want to add to this that this is a significant point that they are getting it again. And we think it's again. Now they're in Israel already. They are on the land. So people could decide, oh, okay, now that's it. We made it. We're here. We don't have to continue and connect with the rest of the people, or they become a little selfish. No, you cannot. So there is a saying that says, "En mukdam u'meuchar b'Torah." There is no early or late in the Torah. It's just what we get out of it, what we learn at the same point that we read it. So first of all, now they have a connection to the land, so don't get already too comfortable. And then also they have to remember both. it's just like when the kids are reciting the Declaration of Independence every day in some schools. One nation under God, right? And they keep saying it to the kids say it. I think it's kind of like what here is happening with the rules and the regulations. And then they add to it. And yes, there was also a method of giving taxes, which I thought that should be mentioned. For example, on Tishrei, they used to give from the cows. And then when it was Shavuot, it was the wheat. And Tu B'Shvat, it's the fruit of the tree. So the whole idea of them now becoming farmers or landowners, and they cultivating the land for the whole survivor, it takes structure now. And also it's not what they're not wandering anymore. So they have to be responsible now for their own well-being, because it's too easy to get comfortable and forget the laws.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Nina, thank you.
So, yeah, so this is it. And yes, there was a method of taxes that they brought to the Levites, or they brought it to Jerusalem. And in our days today, when there is no temple, I mentioned it maybe last year, we used to bring the kids in school. We used to bring a basket with 2 challahs. It says to bring birds too, but no, we didn't go catch birds and brought them. And fruit and vegetables. And we used to donate it to orphanages in the closed area, or temples that has members that need it. So I just wanted to tell you that it was a system that stays for many years.
Great, thank you.
They still bring taxes in Israel. But this time it's money.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, let's keep going. So now we move into a set of rules that are really about deeds and speech and thought. And these, I think, are also, of course, significant in different ways, right? You shall not steal, again, a reference to one of the 10 commandments. You shall not deal deceitfully or falsely with one another. You shall not swear falsely by my name, profaning the name of your God. I am Adonai. You shall not defraud your fellow Israelite. You shall not commit robbery. The wages of a laborer shall not remain with you until morning. Which, by the way, I think that's a really significant one, and really a value that we as Jews are supposed to really uphold. This idea that when someone does work for you, you pay them the day that they worked for you. You don't just kind of hold that and wait until it's convenient for you. Similar if we think about those who are contractors, and then they send a bill, and sometimes they have to keep following up with people. No, for the Jewish ways, you pay them as soon as their work is done, because that they've done the work and now they deserve to be paid for it, right? And so don't put someone, and also on this idea that this is also about power dynamics, right? The wages of a laborer shall not remain with you until the morning. You are in the power position, the one with the money who's now already gotten the results of this labor. And you have a choice. You could either withhold it and hold that power over them, or you can actually pay them what they deserve in a timely manner. And so this is doing the right thing, right? It's a similar thing of not stealing people's time, of like going into a store when you don't necessarily have any desire whatsoever to buy anything. And then a salesperson spends time with you, hoping that they might get some commission off of a sale. And then you leave because you actually had no desire to buy anything, and you're basically wasting their time when they could have been using that time potentially with another customer, right? So all of these connected to one another, both references to the 10 commandments, but going a little further and really pushing us about what is it: not defrauding, not stealing, not lying, so much that it's packed into just a couple of verses here. That are all connected and yet slightly different, right? Stealing, which is different than dealing deceitfully and falsely with someone, swearing falsely by God's name. All of these are connected, but different at the same time. Okay, then we move into some of these.
There's another thing. I mean, there's so much on defraud. I mean, it's particularly in today's society, for goodness sakes, there are a billion ways to defraud someone else. And interesting, the wages of the laborer shall not remain with you until morning. I get that, but Deuteronomy expands on it, doesn't it? And it says, because the laborer is needy and needs that wage. Yep. I mean, this doesn't hold for the office workers that are paid weekly or monthly, but it certainly does in that society earlier on. These are so rich.
Yeah. Well, and it even applies, I think, about how, maybe every 2 or 3 months we have someone come and pest control in the backyard and spray for, whatever, insects of some kind, right? And then we're not usually home, they leave the bill. And so we have a choice. We could either, kind of forget it, let it sit there along with all the other bills, but we really try to pay that right away. If we can, the same day or the next day, but right, that is someone who's come out, they've done their job. The more we can do our fair share of, when a job is well done, paying someone for the work they do, because they deserve that. And we don't know if they're truly, literally, potentially relying on that. And there are plenty of day laborers in this city that we're aware of, right, who need this. And there are many, many more people in our society who are relying on that. I mean, just think about the whole industry of Uber and Uber Eats and, and all these delivery services and all, there's so much there in terms of inequality and a responsibility we have to do our best to try and care for people. Yes, Merle.
There's another piece to that too, that we have a cousin who's a logo, person. I don't know what the right name of it is offhand. And she's creating some stuff for Gabby's bat mitzvah. And I know that when she told Sharon how much it cost, she's doing it as a favor. And I said, she's not charging anywhere near enough. And I said to Sharon, when you pay the bill, throw in an extra $200. This kid's in college and started this business. She needs that money just like anybody else. So I said, I don't want to consider it a tip, just throw in extra money. And if she fights you, let her fight us. But, she's in college. She needs the money. And that is no different than any other laborer. I mean, if you notice that somebody is doing something for you as a favor, then I always throw in extra money.
Great. Thanks, Merle. Okay, let's keep going. These are some great ones. You shall not insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind. You shall fear your God. I am Adonai. You shall not render an unfair decision. Do not favor the poor or show deference to the rich. Judge your kin fairly. Okay, so I love this, the whole do not insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind. But the idea that we do not have the right to take advantage of those who are or who have deficiencies, whatever that may be, right? In this case, it's a focus through the lens of physical deficiencies and disabilities, but really, of course, it's not about that at all, right? Insulting the deaf is really, the way I read this is, and please add your own interpretations, is that this is kind of a reference in my mind to gossip or talking behind someone's back, right? They don't hear you. They are deaf to the insults that you are sharing, and yet you are still insulting them. So don't do that, right? And the same for placing a stumbling block before the blind. I think about the fact that are we making it harder for people to succeed, right? And there are times where we have that inclination to, because we're upset at someone or whatever, or we're jealous of someone, where we may want to put some stumbling blocks in their ability to be successful without them knowing it, but to kind of find ways of putting dampers on other people's abilities to be successful or to be their best selves, right? So in addition to just not taking advantage of people's weaknesses, I do think there are some ways in which we can relate this to just interpersonal relationships in general. I'm curious if anyone else has any other interpretations of this. Yes, Susan.
I read on this, on the stumbling block, and not just taking it literally, because who would do that? I mean, it's just like bad boys, that would put, normal people wouldn't. But I think some of it leads to, like an investment counselor who leads people to companies that pay better kickbacks for the investment counselor. Some of the rabbis would say also, don't tempt an alcoholic with taking him to a bar, or a gambler to give him a gift card for the casino. Those are stumbling blocks as well. So, some of it could also link to fraud. What a person doesn't know, Genevieve's da'at, stealing someone's intelligence, or stealing someone's mind. So, I think these are two of the most important ones. And insult the deaf. You're right. The deaf doesn't hear it, but it's other people do, and what it does to dishonor that deaf person, and also to yourself for doing these bad deeds, and having other people hear it. So I think the resonance here are incredible.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Susan. Miriam, and then Merle. Oh, can't hear you, Miriam. Nope, still can't.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yep.
Yeah, just to add a bit to what Susan very profoundly said, as Susan is usually profound, and very helpful to us. I enjoy what she says very much. The rabbis themselves, I think, elaborated on this particular midrash, and gave their own drasha on it. And they said, even if you're in a store and a man is weighing something in front of you, you cannot see that he might be putting a little stone on the scale itself, and therefore making it more than it is. So that's surely putting a stumbling block. And if you know something about a couple who are about to be married or so, or if you know something that your contribution could be very helpful, are you in conflict about should you say it, or are you being intrusive in something which is not your business? So you have to resolve that moral conflict. Should you make them aware of something that is very important, or should you not? So to this day, we're faced with these kinds of moral conflicts.
Great. Thank you, Miriam. Really great. Merle.
I was just going to say go ahead, Miriam.
No, I'm through. Thank you.
Okay. What Susan said about what people can't hear, but other can, I'm somewhat handicapped. I have a standing problem. So when we go to places like Disneyland, I use a walker. And, or even if I'm walking the mall, wherever, I use a walker. Camp, campers are into it, but others may not be. And I've heard insults like, okay, so this lady went out and bought a walker so she can get in the handicap lines at Disneyland. Or friends that would say, oh, here comes Merle, the old lady with the walker. And I have learned to ignore it because it's been 6 or 8 years now. But my 11 and 9-year-old grandchildren turn around and want to respond like, this isn't a joke, folks, but we've had to teach them you don't respond, just walk away from it. And that's very difficult for them because they understand what the handicap in any direction, whether somebody's blind, whether someone's deaf or anything. People, I think too many people are just biologically nasty. And you kind of have to we have to teach everybody how to cope with it.
Great. Yeah, well, that's a nice lead into the next set, this idea of judgment. Do not deal basely with members. Oh, also, I mean, you talk about the deference to the rich and poor. I mean, we're not, in your case, it's not really related to that, but what does it mean to judge equally and fairly? And that it's not our job to say, oh, poor person, and treat them differently, or to say, oh, because you are very successful, you get special VIP treatment, right? This is about, again, back to the idea of B'Tselem Elohim, this idea that we are all made in the image of God, that we all need support, and we need different types of support. You know, just because someone is wealthy does not mean they don't have plenty of challenges in their life. And just because someone is poor does not mean that they also may have a very rich life of love and support as well. So how do we make sure that we are not unfairly judging people based on either how they look or what we assume is their life? And it's very easy, just like your example of how people judge you based on how you are walking around. How do we really try and see the best in other people? And you're right, in this world, it seems like everyone's initial thought is always to go to the worst and assume the worst and assume a pessimistic outlook on people's behaviors and desires. And it's really tough to fight against that. But our tradition, I believe, is really a hopeful tradition. And we are supposed to try and give people the benefit of the doubt, and also help try and remind people about the true values of how they should be acting in the world. Do not deal basely with members of your people. Oh, go ahead, Susan.
Yeah, just one addendum to that too. I like what you said. I always look as a judge, but I like what you said. It's more of a people's judgment about others in society, but it could also relate to a judge. In which case, if you know that a judge is showing deference to the rich or deference to the poor, judging the poor's favor just because they're poor, that weakens the sense of confidence in the judiciary in a society. And we have a good example of that, although it's not deference to the rich or the poor, in today's Supreme Court. That you know which side, it's a political thing, but nonetheless, I read something of Mayor Tamir talking about that. We need to have faith in our judicial system to create a just society.
Absolutely, right. And many of our laws, and the Talmud goes into this a lot more in terms of judges and the role of judges and the importance of our judicial system. You know, since we are all about justice, and how if you destroy the system of the justices and judicial system, then you cannot have a holy society. You cannot have a society that does the right thing and urges people and punishes those who go against the moral code, right? So you're right, absolutely, Susan. This does also have very much to do with the judicial system itself, right? And making sure that judges are honest and can't be swayed other than based on judicial reasons, right? So great, thank you very much. Do not deal basely with members of your people. Do not profit by the blood of your fellow Israelite. I am Adonai. You shall not hate your kinsfolk in your heart, reprove your kin, but incur no guilt on their account. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against members of your own people. And then, of course, this famous line, love your fellow as yourself, or your neighbor as yourself. I am Adonai. You shall observe my laws. Right. So as you all did with that one line of you shall not insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind, all the interpretations that came out of that. I mean, each one of these is just so chock full of other rules and other ways in which we are supposed to act, right? Don't deal basely, don't profit by the blood of your fellow, right? Don't find someone else's destruction. Don't make that the way in which you succeed. don't hate. I mean, this is where we interestingly, most of the time, our tradition is not so much about the emotions or how you feel. It's really about your actions. If we think about most of these are about our actions. And even here, this is about our actions. And at the same time, it's really melding together actions and feelings, right? But the love is never really used in the Torah in a way that we use it today in terms of emotions, of how we feel about someone. It really is about how we treat someone. And so we're supposed to take this idea of what does it mean to love your neighbor as yourself? I mean, this is, I think, the crux of it all, right? This is like the pinnacle of all of these. If we could figure out a way to love our neighbors and everyone else the way that we should love ourselves, because let's be honest, we also struggle with that, loving ourselves. But if we can figure out a way to do that change, that's a game changer for everyone and everything. Right. So to me, I feel like that is put right here in the middle. You have all the preamble and all the things that kind of start to get you riled up for the climactic moment of the holiness code. And then boom, that's the climax right there. Love your neighbor as yourself. And then, of course, it continues on. We're not going to get to most of them because we're about to end, but it goes on and on and on. You have this, so you can look into them, but then it kind of reverses itself out again. So it kind of goes like this, boom, and then out again. So I really do see if that is the one that really is at the. If we can all be working on that, what that means, right? And how to really take the time to think about what it means to love ourselves and then to love others the way we love ourselves. Susan.
I have something to say with that. Akiva said that's the most important rule in the law in the Torah. But Hillel, I thought, had a wiser thing, and Miriam brought that out before, because you can't, I don't know, and Toulouse wrote, or Dorff wrote, that a book saying, anyway, I'll move on and not mention all these other authors, but Hillel said, essentially, do not treat others as you would not want to be treated, which is a more practical way than having love in your heart for others, because really, are you going to love everybody? No, that's realistic. You could say it's the most important and want that as an ideal, but a more practical way is on the ground. And the other thing is, Merle mentioned this, but you just before that, that command was you should reprove others, but incur no guilt on your own behalf. If we don't correct people who are treating others unfairly, then it continues to go on. It's a hard thing to do. Most of us don't have the guts to do it, but I know, I mean, even in my own case, I said something that was, terminology changes. There was correct terminology in my day and not in today's, and I was corrected, and I thought, good, I want to know that this is not acceptable, and incur no guilt on their behalf is how you say it too, how you reprove someone. Say it with, there you can go with love, or with trying to help that person do the right thing and not make the same mistake. So I think that's a very important, exceedingly important commandment.
Thank you, Susan, for all you. Okay, we're going to end with Miriam today.
Okay, Rabbi, I'd rather not speak. I love what Susan said, how you say it, because we could spend an hour talking on how you approach and how you say something to someone else becomes as important almost as what you have to say. Because you could say something in the very beginning and that's it. You turn them off, you lost them, you can't get them back because of the way you said it. Now, that's not what we're talking about. What I wanted to hear, not for myself because I spoke already, but from our fellow people here who perhaps have not spoken up about a sentence that we paid no attention to. I loved your session, but we surely don't have enough time to pay attention to all these marvelous truisms that were said this morning. And that one was, what do they mean by do not take the guilt of your kin upon yourself? What exactly would they be referring to? What do people think about this? Unfortunately, we probably don't have the time, but I would personally not want to say what I think, but I would personally like to hear what others' reactions are to what does it mean, do not take the guilt of your kin upon yourself.
Right. Well, it's a great question for us to think about over Shabbat because we are out of time. And so Miriam has posed a really good question for us to spend the Shabbat thinking about. And I would just add to that, can you, we're in the period of counting the Omer between Passover and Shavuot. And this is a time where we're really supposed to think about how we can elevate ourselves. Just like on Shavuot, we're going to be climbing the mountain, so to speak, to receive the 10 commandments. What's one or two of these commandments and these rules that we have in Kedoshim that you can work on a little bit more, right? We all have the ones that we are maybe more challenged by than others, those that we are already feel pretty confident in how we do with them, and then others that we can work on. So in addition to Miriam's question about that specific line, think about if there are one or two of these that you could spend a little bit more time elevating in the way in which you interact with other people, because we have been given the tools and we have an obligation to try and bring more holiness into our own lives and into the world. So with that, thank you all for all of your insights as always. So great to see all of you and wishing you a Shabbat Shalom. And to those of you who are mothers, happy Mother's Day on Sunday as well. All right.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, everyone.
very much.
Shabbat Shalom.
Hello, everyone.
Shalom.
Have a great week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.